What would you do if you were called to lead an entire nation, succeeding one of history's most legendary leaders? Joshua faced this challenge, guiding the people of Israel to the promised land after Moses' death. Tasked with crossing impassable rivers, toppling indomitable walls, and confronting powerful enemies, Joshua did not rely on his own strength, but on God's guidance. This is the story of an ordinary man who embraced an extraordinary calling and left an eternal legacy. And Joshua, the son of Nun, was full of the spirit of wisdom, for Moses had laid his hands upon him. So the children of Israel obeyed him and did as the Lord had commanded Moses. Deuteronomy 34:9. Joshua was no stranger to the people of Israel. From his early days as Moses' servant, he stood out for his courage and loyalty. He was one of the 12 spies sent to scout the Promised Land, and alongside Caleb, he delivered a hopeful report, trusting in God's promises while others discouraged the people. This unwavering faith set him apart and prepared him for the pivotal moment that was to come. After Moses' death, the people of Israel faced uncertainty. Moses had been their leader, prophet, and spiritual guide, yet God did not leave them without direction. He chose Joshua as Moses' successor, blending the qualities of courage, wisdom, and devotion to God that he had shown for years. The moment was solemn. Moses, in obedience to God, laid his hands on Joshua, transferring authority in front of the entire congregation of Israel. Through this act, the people understood that Joshua was not only a military leader, but also God's chosen man to guide them toward fulfilling the promises made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Be strong and courageous, for you shall lead this people into the land that the Lord swore to their fathers to give them, and you shall cause them to inherit it. The Lord goes before you. He will be with you. He will not leave you or forsake you. Do not fear or be dismayed. Deuteronomy 31:7-8. In those days of preparation, Joshua surely felt the weight of responsibility. He was succeeding a man who had spoken with God face to face and led miracles such as the parting of the Red Sea. Yet the assurance that God himself would be with him gave him the strength to accept the call. With this divine choice, a new chapter in Israel's history began. Joshua was to be not only a military commander, but also an example of faith and obedience, guiding the people to rely completely on God. Joshua's first major challenge as Israel's leader came quickly. The Jordan River, a formidable natural barrier, lay between the people and the Promised Land. It was harvest season, and the Jordan's waters were overflowing, making crossing impossible without a miracle. Faced with this situation, Joshua did not hesitate. His trust in God's promises was absolute, and he received specific instructions to lead the people in this crucial moment. And it shall come to pass, when the soles of the feet of the priests carrying the ark of the Lord of all the earth, rest in the waters of the waters of the Jordan shall be cut off, and those flowing downstream shall stand in one heap. Joshua 3:13. The scene was breathtaking. The priests advanced with the Ark of the Covenant, and as soon as their feet touched the water, the currents miraculously stopped. The river divided, leaving a dry path for the entire nation of Israel to cross to the other side. The people walked through with awe, recalling the similar miracle their forefathers had witnessed when crossing the Red Sea under Moses' leadership. The priests, carrying the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord, stood firm on dry ground in the middle of the Jordan, while all Israel passed by on dry ground until the whole nation had completed crossing the Jordan. Joshua 3:17. To commemorate this event, Joshua ordered a monument to be built with 12 stones taken from the riverbed, one for each tribe of Israel. This monument would serve as an eternal reminder for future generations of God's power and faithfulness. These stones will serve as a sign among you. When your children ask in the future, "What do these stones mean?" you shall tell them that the waters of the Jordan were stopped before the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord. Joshua 4:6-7. The crossing of the Jordan marked the beginning of a new chapter for Israel. The people not only witnessed God's power, but also learned to trust Joshua as their leader. Once Israel had crossed the Jordan, they faced their first major challenge, Jericho. This city was an impregnable fortress with massive walls that seemed unbreakable. Humanly speaking, conquering Jericho was impossible. However, God had a unique plan to deliver this city into Israel's hands, a plan that required absolute faith and complete obedience. Look, I have handed Jericho, its king, and its warriors over to you. You shall march around the city, all the men of war, once a day for 6 days. Joshua 6:2-3. The people obeyed without question. Each day they silently marched around Jericho while the priests carried the Ark of the Covenant and blew ram's horn trumpets. The inhabitants of Jericho watched in amazement and perhaps mockery from atop the walls. However, the Israelites continued to trust God's words through Joshua. On the 7th day, God's instructions were carried out precisely. After the 7th circuit, the priests sounded the trumpets, and Joshua gave the command to shout. The noise was deafening, and in a miraculous event, the walls of Jericho collapsed. When the trumpet sounded and the people shouted, at the sound of the trumpet and the people's shout, the walls fell down, and the people went straight into the city and captured it. Joshua 6:20. The euphoria of victory at Jericho was quickly replaced by shock and confusion during the next battle. Ai, a smaller and less fortified city, seemed like an easy target. Yet, when the Israelites attacked, they suffered a humiliating defeat. The soldiers of Ai pursued them, inflicting losses among the Israelites. Joshua, deeply distressed, fell before the Ark of the Covenant along with the elders, seeking answers from God. In his plea, he asked why they had been defeated, especially after the miraculous victory at Jericho. Israel has sinned. They have taken devoted things. They have stolen. They have lied. And they have put them among their own possessions. Therefore the children of Israel cannot stand against their enemies. Joshua 7:11-12. God revealed that the cause of their defeat was hidden sin within the camp. Achan, a man from the tribe of Judah, had disobeyed divine orders by taking consecrated items from Jericho for himself. This act of disobedience brought God's anger not only upon Achan, but also upon the entire nation of Israel. Following God's instructions, Joshua summoned all the tribes to identify the culprit. When Achan was exposed, he confessed his sin, and the stolen items were recovered. The purification of the camp was severe but necessary. Achan and all associated with him were destroyed to remove the curse of sin. Thus you shall purge the sin from among you, so that the Lord may once again be with you. Joshua 7:13. With the people purified and reconciled to God, Joshua organized a second attack on Ai. This time, under divine guidance, the city was easily conquered. The victory was not only military but also spiritual, restoring Israel's confidence in God's faithfulness and reminding them of the importance of holiness. With sin removed from the camp, Israel was ready to move forward again. God gave Joshua a specific strategy for attacking Ai, which included setting an ambush behind the city. This time, victory was assured because the people had been reconciled to God. Then the Lord said to Joshua, "Do not fear or be dismayed. Take all the army with you, rise and go up against Ai. See, I have given into your hands the king of Ai, his people, his city, and his land." Joshua 8:1. After this victory, Joshua realized that advancing militarily alone was not enough. It was also essential to reaffirm the people's spiritual commitment to God. He led the Israelites to Mount Ebal, where a command previously given by Moses was fulfilled, to build an altar and renew the covenant with the Lord. The altar was constructed with uncut stones, as instructed by the law. There, Joshua wrote a copy of Moses' law and presented burnt offerings and fellowship offerings. It was a solemn moment where the entire nation, including foreigners living among them, gathered to hear the blessings and curses of the law. Joshua read all the words of the law, the blessings and the curses according to all that is written in the book of the law. There was not a word of all that Moses commanded that Joshua did not read before the whole assembly of Israel, including the women, children, and foreigners living among them. Joshua 8:34-35. This event not only strengthened the people's faith in God, but also marked a moment of unity and commitment. The covenant was renewed, reminding everyone that obedience was key to conquering and inhabiting the promised land. With the covenant renewed and the people spiritually fortified, Joshua led Israel through a series of military campaigns that would define the conquest of Canaan. As they advanced, God himself guided every step, ensuring miraculous victories and demonstrating his power over Israel's enemies. The first major confrontation of this phase was the coalition of kings from southern Canaan, led by the king of Jerusalem. Alarmed by Israel's rapid progress, these kings united to attack Gibeon, a recent ally of the Israelites. Joshua, faithful to his covenant with Gibeon, responded swiftly, marching all night with his army to confront the enemy coalition. Then Joshua spoke to the Lord on the day the Lord delivered the Amorites into the hands of Israel, and he said in the presence of Israel, "Sun, stand still over Gibeon, and moon, in the valley of Aijalon." So the sun stood still and the moon stopped until the nation avenged itself on its enemies. Joshua 10:12-13. This extraordinary event not only ensured a decisive victory, but also demonstrated to the people and their enemies that the God of Israel was Lord over all creation. Never before or since has there been a day like it where God so directly responded to a man's request. Thus Joshua took the whole land, according to all that the Lord had spoken to Moses, and he gave it as an inheritance to Israel, according to their tribal divisions, and the land rested from war. Joshua 11:23. With the major military campaigns completed, Joshua turned his attention to dividing the promised land among the tribes of Israel. This was not merely an administrative act, but a direct fulfillment of the promises God had made to the patriarchs. Thus Joshua took the whole land, according to all that the Lord had spoken to Moses, and gave it as an inheritance to Israel, according to their tribal divisions. And the land rested from war. Joshua 11:23. Each territory was carefully allocated. During this process, Caleb, Joshua's companion since their days as spies, approached to claim the land God had promised him. Now then, just as the Lord promised, he has kept me alive for 45 years. Now give me this hill country that the Lord promised me that day. Joshua 14:10-12. Aware that his days were coming to an end, Joshua summoned all the people of Israel, including leaders, elders, judges, and officials, to deliver a final message. This was not merely a farewell speech, but a solemn exhortation for Israel to remain faithful to God. Joshua understood that the people's obedience would determine their success or failure in the promised land. "I am old and well advanced in years, and you have seen all that the Lord your God has done for you against all these nations, for the Lord your God is he who has fought for you." Joshua 23:2-3. In his message, Joshua reminded the people of all the victories God had given them, emphasizing that it was not through their own strength or abilities, but through God's faithfulness to his covenant. He warned them not to turn away from the Lord or adopt the practices of the nations still among them. "Be very careful to obey and do all that is written in the book of the law of Moses, so that you do not turn aside from it to the right or to the left." Joshua 23:6. The climax of the speech came when Joshua urged the people to make a clear and definitive choice about whom they would serve. With powerful words, he declared his own eternal loyalty to God. "But if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord." Joshua 24:15. These words resonated deeply among the people, who responded by affirming their commitment to the Lord. They declared that they would remember how God had delivered them from Egypt and given them the promised land. However, Joshua did not accept their response lightly. He warned them that serving the Lord required absolute faithfulness and reminded them that God is holy and jealous. You are witnesses against yourselves that you have chosen to serve the Lord. And they said, "We are witnesses." Joshua 24:22. Joshua sealed this commitment by establishing a covenant that day and setting up a large stone as a witness to the agreement, placing it under an oak near the sanctuary of the Lord. This stone will be a witness against you, for it has heard all the words the Lord has said to us. It will be a witness against you if you are untrue to your God. Joshua 24:27. With this renewed covenant, Joshua concluded his life as a faithful and obedient leader. Shortly afterward, he died at the age of 110, leaving a legacy of faith and devotion that shaped Israel for generations. Israel served the Lord throughout the lifetime of Joshua and of the elders who outlived him, and who had experienced everything the Lord had done for Israel. Joshua 24:31. The life of Joshua stands as a testimony to how faith and obedience to God can transform not only an individual, but an entire nation. His leadership served as a model for future generations, reminding them that both spiritual and earthly victories always depend on walking in the ways of the Lord.